Nothing is so difficult as not deceiving yourself. Point 1. Point 2. If a lion could speak, you wouldn't understand him. These are very enigmatic statements. I'll give you a further clue that when the famous ascetic European philosopher of the 20th century, Ludwig Wittgenstein, was on a train with one of his, students or colleagues, whose name was Straffa, and who was going to visit a philosopher who was imprisoned in Italy, Gramsci. Straffa asked him, "What is your philosophy about? What do you think you're doing?" Wittgenstein, an extremely arrogant Austrian human being, said, "My philosophy is expressed in my book, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus." A very small book, 70 pages, and virtually incomprehensible. But what he did say was this, that he said that talking about meaning, the meaning of not life, but meaning that exists between human beings. He said, where does this meaning come from? And he develops his theory. I'll talk to you about that later. But basically the theory was that there were propositions that we create, that we present, and those propositions are in exact relation with what he called facts. Not the things of the world, but propositions and facts. Now, that was very important for Straffa, who was sitting in the train beside him, because Straffa said he did something very interesting, as only Italians do. He did that, which means in English, bullshit. Get it right. That can't be right. That there is not an exact relationship between propositions, such as they are, and facts in life. No, there is something else. There is gesticulation. And there is another story about Wittgenstein, when he was walking and thinking and being slightly mad as he was, going through the streets of Cambridge, where he was a professor. A bicycle nearly ran over him, and the cyclist did that, just that. Wittgenstein, of course, thought about that, and he thought that his original notion of the exact relationship between propositions and facts was mistaken. There was much more to human life and human meaning than that. I have managed to put everything firmly into place in my book, except, and perhaps by being silent about it. This, as I was saying before, is very enigmatic, doesn't seem to mean much, but silence and quietude in 20th century European philosophy, as I mentioned in a previous episode of Heidegger, is crucially important. Why? You get the impression that there is nothing left to say. Let me tell you about Ludwig Wittgenstein, who is the youngest child of 8 children, born in Vienna in 1889, April the 26th, I believe, to a very extremely wealthy family, possibly and probably the wealthiest family in Europe because his father was a merchant of steel and metals and irons. So, being wealthy, as was the tradition, they weren't sent to normal school. They were held at home and given tutors. But there was a strangeness about the family, to say the least. First of all, I want to say that 3 of his brothers committed suicide. His sisters, because he was the youngest, adored him, loved him, but thought he was the most stupid. This is an incredible story, really, because he became and was fascinated by things to do with engineering, construction, and so on, as small boys tend to be, as he was. So, for example, at the age of 8 or 9, he built his first sewing machine for his sisters to make clothes on, for example. That was in itself extraordinary. There was a further background that I should mention, not just these little anecdotes, but the fact that the family was of mixed religious origin. It was a time when there was an enormous development of a cultural development in Vienna. For example, the family was very, very musical and regularly had in their home Brahms, Mahler, for example, who entertained them with their music. And they were an intensely musical family, as Ludwig was himself, although he never played an instrument. His brother, Paul, who was enlisted in the army in the First World War, for example, lost his right arm. And because he was so extraordinary as a musical genius, in the sense that he could play extraordinary things like this, extraordinary musicians and composers like Ravel wrote for him compositions, for example, for the left hand. And if you were to hear these compositions, you would be astounded that there weren't 10 hands playing the piano. There was just one.